In terms of opportunity for vocational schools, I think this area has been a frustrating one, and it's historically been probably the one place we get our lunch handed to us by traditional ed, the 4-year programs. High school recruiting has, I think, been perceived as an opportunity for most of us, but we haven't been able to actualize a program that's really effective and can be counted on as a source of enrollments. So that's why we're very excited to have a guest today, Lee Doubleday. Lee is the Director of Operations at the Imagine America Foundation, and Lee is an expert in high school recruiting. Lee, welcome to the Enrollment Resources webinar.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Shane.
So how big is this opportunity for us?
This opportunity is huge, and it's a growing one, and that's what I'm prepared to talk to you all about today. It's just sort of the trend in education and where things are going as far as the high school market is concerned, and where career and technical education fits.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And so I know you have a little presentation you're going to share with us. We'll get to it in a sec. From my lens, there's been a pretty big shift, and COVID kind of was part of the catalyst, and
Absolutely.
It's kind of two things. COVID and what we could view as maybe a cultural divide, where a portion of the population views traditional education as kind of not kind of serving their cultural interests. Is that, 100%. Am I reading that right?
Absolutely. And Mike Rowe is a celebrity and one that's gaining popularity for a reason, because his message is talking about essential careers and career-focused education. And it seems to be resonating with the Generation Z, which is what I'm going to be talking about in my presentation today.
Okay. Well, okay. Why don't we get to that, Dan? I don't want to steal your thunder in your presentation.
Sure.
So you're gonna give us a kind of an overview of Imagine America, how you guys look at it, and then we're gonna have a chat afterwards. And if there's time, I'm going to show one of the tools that we use in our virtual advisor platform to help schools kind of connect with prospective high school students.
Yeah, sure. All right, let's go ahead and get started. This, I'm not going to bore anybody to death, hopefully. So this should be relatively quick. Little bit about myself. My name is Lee Doubleday, and as Shane had mentioned, I've been in higher education for over 10 years now. I'm the Director of Operations here at the Imagine America Foundation, and I went the traditional school route, even though, fun fact about me, my father is a high school culinary arts teacher at the local high school here in Northern Virginia. And so I grew up in the career and technical education space, but even I was unaware of the types of opportunities that were out there when I was going through high school only 15 or so years ago. Today, I want to talk to you about who the high school student is and how they're influenced. I want to talk to you about why you should care about high school recruiting. And I want to talk to you about how to create a strategy for high school recruitment and innovative ways to create partnerships with high schools. And then at the end, I have a little bit of a golden nugget for you if you're looking to tap into this market. So to start off, I want to talk about who the high school student is. Now, when we're talking about high school students, most of the colleges that I work with that recruit high school students are interested, obviously, in getting in front of juniors and seniors at the high school level, which would put them at around 16 to 18 years old and part of the Generation Z. These students, now the majority of them have taken at least one course in a career and technical education in their high school level. 77% of them have taken at least one course, so they're relatively familiar with that. And that's something that has changed in the last 10, 12 years. More and more students are actually taking CTE courses as a requirement while they're in high school that they were not, even when I was going through high school, they weren't doing. And 40% of that population is male, 33% female. And this student is most likely a member of a student-led organization like Skills USA, DECA, Future Farmers of America. These are all student-led organizations that at the end of my presentation, I will talk about a little bit about establishing partnerships with organizations like this to help you navigate the high school market. But again, these students are maybe prefer more hands-on learning in the classroom environment. And there's one major influencer on a high school student's decision on where they want to go to school. And it is not a celebrity. It's not Tiger Woods. It's not Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. It is their high school counselor. Their high school counselor, as you can think back to when you were in high school, it's the same story. You may meet with this counselor to talk about post-secondary options. And when you're speaking to this counselor, you're writing down some notes, and then you go back and you talk to your family and friends about what the counselor had told you, what might be good for you. And you get the opinions of your family and friends, and then you may go back to your counselor and say, okay, here's the direction after taking all of this in and this consideration of where I think I want to go, which is why relationships with counselors is vitally important to your high school recruitment strategy. Okay, so why should you care about relationships with high school counselors and recruiting high school students? And in a minute, I'm going to go through some statistics, but in general, high school seniors have seen the generations before them go to traditional colleges and graduate with either no job prospects or going into working at waiting tables like I did, and then that being taken away from you potentially because of COVID, which is what Shane was saying earlier, and then being left with heavy student loans. Now more than ever, the demand for skilled workers is dramatically increasing, while at the same time, as I'm sure all of you are aware, the baby boomer generation is starting to retire, which has also been put forth even more so because of COVID, which leaves a really good opportunity for this younger generation, and not to mention an increased interest in career and technical education. And to what Shane was saying earlier, this is some statistics that I pulled from ECMC. Only 48% of the high school students that were graduating in 2020 were interested in a 4-year university path. That was down 23% from just earlier that same year of students that are contemplating a traditional university route. 74% of those individuals said that a career-based education made more sense in today's economy. And 63% said that the top place to learn is in a hands-on lab.
Hey, Lee, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
And if you go back to that previous slide.
Yep.
Why is this is a pretty massive shift in perception? Why do you think this has happened?
I think that a lot of these individuals have older brothers or sisters that went through the traditional path and went to a traditional college, graduated, and were left, like I said earlier, the same thing that kind of happened with me. They were waiting tables or doing something else as they tried to get their foot in the door at a different company or do something. And then COVID hit and they were left going back to their parents' house, and they had student loan debt. And I think, you kind of can't really talk about all of this without mentioning the student loan debt crisis and where this is coming from. And then on top of that, the jobs. And that's something that our career colleges are really good at, which is placing students in jobs.
And have traditional colleges kind of priced themselves out of the market in a way?
Yeah, I would definitely say that that is something that we're seeing, whereas, more and more students that are applying for a scholarship through my organization, which I didn't really talk too much about today, but a lot of students that apply for a scholarship to go to any one of our partner institutions, career colleges across the United States, are telling us that they're doing so because traditional colleges are way too expensive. I mean, I actually have a son. He's 1 year old, but I'm looking at establishing a 529 for him. And they're telling me I'm going to need close to $200,000 for my son to go to school in state, in Virginia, in state. I mean, Are you kidding me? How is anybody going to afford this?
That's not so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So the Gen, whatever the one before Gen, the one before that, they're the cautionary tale that the current crop of
the millennials
seniors are noticing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the millennials, they sort of paved the path, and they're all coming to find out that it wasn't what they were told, and so the generation behind them are hearing their older brothers and sisters or cousins and they went through this and saying this. The Generation Z is a lot more practical in the way that they think about things, and they're looking at that situation and saying, I don't think so. But there's still a divide and an opportunity to educate not only this Generation Z, but also counselors. So according to a study done by Big Rents, only 16% of the Generation Z students believed that an education in skilled trades can lead to high-paying jobs. And as we all know, that's just simply not true. So there's definitely an opportunity to educate this next generation that's going through high school about the truth of career and technical education, but not just to educate the students. We also need to educate the counselors. And like I mentioned earlier, that's vitally important to a high school recruitment strategy. And I didn't pull any hard statistics on this, and I might be able to find it afterwards and send it to anybody who's interested. But something that we're seeing here at the Imagine America Foundation, so part of our scholarship application requires a high school counselor to nominate a student. What we have found is that there has been a large exodus of high school counselors post-COVID that decided to retire maybe a little early, which leaves a lot more younger, maybe fresh out of college counselors that are coming in that are unfamiliar with career and technical education, or do not have preconceived notions of career and technical education, which leaves a very interesting opportunity for our schools to educate and get their foot in the door and talking about who you are and what you do, in hopes that this will, articulate. So
it just keeps getting better and better, Lee.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think it's a very good time. It's a very unique opportunity to establish relationships with high schools and recruit high school students. It's not easy. I'm not here to tell you that it's easy. I've put together a 5-step strategy to help you start to establish a relationship with your high schools that are around your campuses. But I will tell you that you're not going to be able to do this without partnerships. You're going to need partnerships in order to do this. And I'm going to talk about it again and again, but the main reason is it's one thing for you to talk about your school, but it's another thing for a partner that you work with to talk about your school, which I'm going to get to in just a minute.
Mm-hmm. But if we think about in terms of kind of ROI or value for the institution, putting forth the effort, given it's a little bit hard, would also represent a competitive advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. So think about it this way. Let's say that you get invited through either this network, or you're following this 5-step strategy, and you now get invited to 2 to 3 high schools every single year and talk to classrooms of 60 plus students that you're now able to recruit from those high schools. So you've established a relationship with these counselors and teachers, and you're making a name for yourself inside of the high school. If you can recruit just 1 to 2 students every year from all 3 of those schools, I mean, think about the return on investment that would be, especially for a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about here. There may be some relatively inexpensive ways to get started. And so I want to talk about the 5-step strategy really quickly, Shane, and then kind of go into partnerships and how enrollment resources may be able to help you as well. The first step to this strategy is obviously to do your research and just start with the areas you recruit students from. So whether that's 30 miles from around your campus location, or if you have housing or something along those lines, maybe you could start a little more nationally. But I would recommend just starting nearby your campus. How many high schools are in your area? You want to know that. How many are public and private? You may want to start with just trying to do the best you can to reach public institutions. A lot of our schools have found better success that way. How many of these public institutions are offering CTE courses or academy classes? So there's different lingo there. You may need to familiarize yourself. Some high schools call it an academy, where they offer career and technical education. Some call it something else, but you may need to just familiarize yourself with the area. I know in New York, they call it BOSES, and there's so many other different names for what we're talking about. And then obviously, what are the student demographics of these areas? So maybe taking a look internally at your student demographics and trying to find on public websites the high schools that have similar demographics. It might be a good place to start. And then finding the right person to talk to. Is it the teacher? Is it a counselor? If they have a career and tech ed center, maybe the career and tech ed center's department chair might be the best place to start, and trying to find where they go, which I'm going to get to in just a minute. Mm-hmm. So you're going to want to establish partnerships, which is what I'm calling step 2. And I don't just mean partnerships with high schools. I also mean partnerships with organizations that will help you create relationships with those high schools. But to start, I just want to talk about the goals of each of these. The goal of creating a relationship with a high school is obviously to be able to come in and speak to classrooms of students so that you can recruit year after year at that high school from their graduating class. And you also want to create relationships with organizations, and these goals may be different. They may be to exhibit or attend shows where you know the educators and teachers that you're trying to get in front of are going to be, or to build a database of high school counselors and educators. If you go to a state counselor association meeting and you exhibit there, you may get a list of attendees that you can use to start help you create a database of these counselors to be able to reach out to them and offer something.
Lee, can you expand on the type of organizations you mean in this?
Yes,
you're talking about employers?
Yeah, absolutely. Employers may be a really good way. I wasn't actually prepared to talk about employers, but part of what my presentation is going to talk about on the next slide is different organizations that you may be able to partner with that work with high school counselors and teachers. But you can see at the bottom, I put this pro tip. You want to make sure that you're offering something before you ask for anything. And so, that may mean that if you do get a chance to speak to educators or students, maybe that means you bring in an employer that you partner with to kind of give gravity to what you're talking about. And if your presentation is talking about not just your school, but about the importance of what your school teaches and the career opportunities and the programs that your school teaches, and you have an employer there with you that can, again, bring some gravity to what you're talking about, that may be a very good way to partner with the employers and to give them exposure. So what I mean by provide value first before you ask, what are some different ways that you can do that? Some of our schools that we partner with have offered FAFSA assistance. This is just an example, but they offer to sponsor a FAFSA night at the high school. And basically what it is that the financial aid officer at the school goes in and helps students fill out a FAFSA. And the students bring their parents, they're filling out FAFSA forms, they can ask questions. And the majority of those students may not be interested in going to your school at that time, but the idea is that you are offering something to the high school, to the counselor. That counselor is able to talk about the value they're providing students and parents, and you're helping that counselor and you're establishing a relationship with that counselor so that you can get invited to talk to students about your programs at a later point. But this is an example of what some of our schools that are successful with this would do to host a FAFSA night. And one of the things that I've found interesting that comes from this is that the colleges are telling me, Lee, I have students that filled out a FAFSA to go to a completely different school. And I don't need to tell you all how many times this happens, but somebody goes to a community college, doesn't work out, they come to your school. They go to the local state school, it doesn't work out, they come to your school. And what that college had told me was that by holding these FAFSA nights, it's a really great way to start offering something to students and then getting your foot in the door with them and getting your brand and your logo and your name in front of them. And they remember you as providing value to them, so they end up coming back to the school later.
So it's important for the school not to have a kind of mercantile view of this, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's not a lead generation tactic necessarily. It's a relationship PR kind of a tactic.
Exactly. Yeah. I would say the schools that do the best job of high school recruitment are more relationship oriented with their high school partners, which obviously ends up trickulating into lead generation and everything else that comes with that. But another couple of ways that you can provide value to the high school counselor is providing informational packets. I mean, all of you have statistics on the different programs that you teach and the career outlooks and what those look like. Providing packets and mailing them to the local high school with your business card or your logo, or even laminating pieces of resources and sending that in so that they have it on their desk or they hang it up in their office and it has your logo on it. That's a really great way to get your foot in the door. And then obviously offering a scholarship program to their students would be a really good way to do that. And you can either, partner with a group like ours or offer your own high school scholarship, or partner with groups like Skills USA and host scholarship competitions at your campus location, which is another way that that a lot of schools utilize partnerships with organizations like Skills USA. So for example, I mentioned earlier, my dad is a culinary arts teacher, and every year his students qualify to compete at the local state level and regional level. And at the state level, they go to the Culinary Institute of Virginia, which is an ECPI university school. And ECPI University partners with Skills USA to be able to offer the competition at their campus, and they use their kitchen there for this competition that gets, I don't know, 30, 40 students who are interested in culinary that end up flocking to their school and using their kitchen, and their teachers and counselors and parents all come to this meeting. So I would just highly suggest that you look into local events that you may be able to sponsor or run scholarship competitions at your school through groups like Skills USA.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that builds on this. You know, the career schools, one of our core strengths is we're community-based.
Yeah,
for the most part, right? And that connection to community is part of the differentiation of the sector.
absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. You know, whether that's through employers or your high schools, or you know, the Jobs for America's graduates that are near you, or workforce boards. You know, the importance of connecting with the community is what I'm trying to talk about here. And then what do you do after you do establish a relationship with the high school? Let's say you get in touch with Mr. Jones, who's the senior counselor there at the local high school near you, or you attend a show that that gives you an exhibit or a attendee list, and you have a list of 20, 30 high schools that are near you and those counselors' contact information. I would say, you know, you want to establish ways to stay in touch with them, whether that be through drip campaigns, which is a fancy way of saying automated email campaigns. You may also want to promote your events. So you want to stay in constant communication with them, and you could be promoting events that you either hold at your own institution or offer virtual presentations or on-site presentations to these counselors, and give them the opportunity to speak with you about different things that you might be able to come in and talk to students about. But you want to maintain these relationships. And the importance here is that in the high school market, counselors a lot of times switch off roles. So the senior counselor might be Mr. Jones this year, but next year is Mrs. Schwartz, who moves on to, who was the junior counselor, is now the senior counselor. So maintaining these relationships of the databases that you're building is vitally important to making sure that you have a current list and that you're constantly promoting your schools. I would also suggest looking at the state associations, the counselor state associations in your state. A lot of these, and I can put you in touch with the person who handles exhibiting for those shows. A lot of these are a relatively inexpensive way to attend shows like this, to talk about, you know, STEM careers that don't require a bachelor's degree. That might be a really great signage that you could have at your booth, and to talk to counselors about the overlooked value of certificate and associate programs in career and technical education institutions. So I would just suggest looking at ASCA. And then also the student-led organizations, like I mentioned earlier, Skills USA is one, Future Farmers of America is another, there's DECA, and there are others that you may be able to find online, but I would suggest reaching out to groups like that have a high database of high school counselors, teachers, and students.
Lee, how important to the counselors is our graduation outcomes?
It's funny that you mentioned that. Did you see these slides before I?
No, I didn't. But because there was some data that just came out. I think it was from CQ, and basically the graduation rates on four-year programs are atrocious,
abysmal.
Right? And they poorly tracked, and it's a kind of a thing they've been in a way hiding for years, right? So there's a lens on that on the career education sector, but God, four-year guys are brutal.
No,
nobody knows, right? It's like an unknown, it's a dirty secret in the education.
Yeah, and I think, to talk about that a little further, the high school student and the high school counselor are probably looking at that a little bit more than they used to at this point. And so one of the ways that if you do get a chance to talk about your school and your programs eventually at any presentation that you're offering, you want to talk about what differentiates your school from any other schools. And the most important thing that I see schools do is they talk about graduation rates and employer relationships. Those are the biggest things, because what you're really talking about is ROI on the student side. It's, what is it that the student is going to get that they can't get at any other institution, either because those institutions have failed students, and like we're talking about now with graduation rates being low, but there also may be employer relationship issues. And, traditional colleges, they don't really have the same responsibility, I guess you could say, to help students become employed like our schools do. And so this is again, another way to kind of differentiate your school would be to talk about employer relationships, graduation rates, and then obviously your length of program, which is another huge ROI for students. They can get in, graduate faster than they would at alternative options for them, and start working right away, and explaining that to counselors, like, again, that are maybe coming out of college and may not have any preconceived notions of our space, or may not know much about our space. Talking to them about that ROI for their students would go a long way in establishing a relationship.
Interesting. I don't know if I agree with you that the four-year programs don't have a responsibility for outcomes. I don't think they know how to get them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that our schools do a much better job of that. But and then finally, I want to leave you with this about sponsoring events, and how important sponsoring events, either hosting events at your campus or sponsoring events outside of your own campus can be. Either, like I mentioned earlier, Skills USA needs hosts for state and regional competitions, and I'm not a spokesperson for them. I would just suggest reaching out to them. I think they do a really great job. They seem to be ahead of the curve. They had Mike Rowe as their keynote speaker for a couple of years in a row, starting in 2015. They've been on top of all of this stuff. And then either working with third-party groups like Imagine America or the State Association, Counselor Association, to sponsor virtual events with counselors and teachers might be a really great way to get started. And then I want to leave you with a little nugget here that some of our schools have seen a lot of really great success in, which is exhibiting at homeschool association meetings. There is a lot of students that are considering homeschool or are going into homeschool situations. There's no counselor layer there. At those homeschool association meetings, you're talking directly with students and parents about your programs and your schools. And the beauty of it is there's hardly any career college competitions. At least this is the reports that I'm getting back from some of my schools, is that they're really the only career college option there. They put up a banner that says 5 great STEM careers that don't require a bachelor's degree, and are flooded with students and parents that are coming up and speaking to them. The beauty of that is that you're dealing directly with a lead right there at your exhibit booth with a student that is interested in learning a little bit more about not having to go the traditional route. So that could be a really great, inexpensive way to get your foot or to dip your toe in the water, if you will. I don't know what it costs to exhibit at your state homeschool association meetings, but from what I've seen, it's anywhere between $750 or something like that. A little bit of your time.
Lee, how big is that revolution, right? Because certainly in the media, there's a massive amount of parent revolts against education boards, right? Which is my understanding, driving interest in homeschooling or charter schools or kind of alternative.
Yeah, absolutely.
How big is that?
I don't have any hard statistics to tell you right now, and I didn't look it up, but I will tell you this, that we have seen a large increase in the number of scholarship applications that we're getting on our end from homeschool associations that we were not seeing just last year or maybe 2 years ago. So I don't know the real numbers on that, but it definitely, like you said, you can tell in the news, there's definitely a movement towards homeschool education for students. And there's maybe less resources for those individuals on career and college education than there would be at maybe a traditional high school option, where the counselor at least has some material around about college, career and technical education options, I would suggest looking into the homeschool association meetings. With that, Shane, I'll turn it over to you because, like I mentioned earlier, partnerships is the key to all of this. You can't do it alone because it's one thing to talk about your own school yourself, but it's another to work with partners that can help you. And I'll turn it over to you now, Shane.
Well, I just want to continue the conversation. This is fantastic. I did forget to mention at the beginning of this that if you do have questions, there's a chat box at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to ask a question there, and we'll do our best to get to them close to the end of this webinar. Okay.
Oh, Jack, how you doing?
There we go. Okay, first question. Whose job is this in the organization? Right, so it's a lot of work. It's a sales and marketing campaign, and it's not a advertise and get a result. It's kind of a
So
who should be doing this?
Great question. A lot of our schools that don't have an established high school admissions reps, it's in admissions, and a lot of schools that don't have an established high school admissions rep will use the admissions rep that they have to help them start virtually. And then move into doing presentations at the school because they only have so much time. And so there's easier ways to get started through the use of third-party groups and partnerships, like I mentioned earlier, that can help you get started if you don't already have the staff on.
But this is almost more of a B2B sales process.
Sure.
And because it's not responding to student inquiries. This is initiating relationships, nurturing them over time, supporting them with things that are of interest to the high school counselors, the gatekeeper to the whole deal.
Yeah.
That's a different skill set than the typical admissions person. Is that a fair way to think about it? Yeah,
I would say that. I wouldn't discredit the admission staff. I think they are definitely able to speak to all of this, and they're a good way. Look, they're the front of the house for a reason, right? They're the ones that talk about the school. They know what they're talking about, and so I would feel comfortable, suggesting that admissions are the ones that talk to these counselors. And on the case of a lot of our schools, that is who talks to the counselors. It may be somebody, and they have support from marketing, but it's typically the admissions reps. And like Jack came on and asked the question earlier, he's a big time admissions guy. He's a high school admissions guy, but that he's the one who creates and establishes the relationships in the high schools as well.
Attaboy, Jack. Okay. What are realistic goals for the school? So if I'm planning my marketing campaign, I'm doing my budget, my enrollment budget, trying to sort out, who's going to come from where.
Yeah.
What can I budget to this?
Yeah, I would say, number one, I would look at attending the homeschool association, the event, wherever that is. And like I said, I think it's like $500, $700 to attend or exhibit at something like that. I would use that as a way to gauge interest in your school and programs at the high school student level. And then I would start to invest a little bit more into state counselor association meetings or through the use of third-party organizations to reach out virtually to these high schools that are near you. And you may even be able to partner with a group like Imagine America to help you establish which high schools that would be the best fit for you to start with, and try to get into those high schools virtually first. It's a little less expensive that way. And then, be able to grow that and scale that after you've made a couple of relationships and you've done some presentations and you're getting money in through admissions.
I'm going to follow up. I'm going to ask it in a different way. The schools that are doing this successfully,
sure,
just ballpark as a percentage of total enrollment.
Oh, that's a very hard question to answer, and the reason why is it depends on your program offerings.
Sure, so someone who's best case scenario, I'm killing it. I've got a high school program that is rocking. I got programs that suit it.
Okay.
Is it 10%? Is it 30%? Is it
no?
80%?
I would say it's higher. I mean, Tash, you can probably speak to this too because you spent some time at one of our
Yeah.
The groups that I would say does it really, really well. And I would say it's probably what, 40-50%. I mean, it's a lot of high school. It
Wow.
depends on the
Okay.
program.
And,
Okay,
and
so-
it depends on the start you're talking about, but
True.
over an annual basis, it was in the mid 30s. It was just over 130.
Okay, so
Yep.
this is realistic, you know, assuming you have programs that are suited to this kind of market and there's channels to go market it through in wherever you are.
Yeah.
This could be up to 30-ish% of total enrollment. And this is a thing that's less subject to the fluctuations in marketing, right? Like, sort of related, we're seeing kind of a decline, sort of a lead flow decline in general, right? And there was sort of a COVID boom for people looking to change careers. It's I would say winding down a little bit. And so
Sure.
as schools get used to kind of abundance and it starts to wane, they get edgy and are looking for other ways to augment that.
Right.
Seems to me this is a trend you identified as a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
could
exactly.
represent-
And maybe that's a better way to frame the answer to the question, because it's going to be different for every single school. But if you're looking at your student population right now and you're seeing 2 to 4% of your student population as high school, I think this is a really unique opportunity in our place and time to maybe move that a couple of percentage points north.
You didn't really talk about Imagine America Foundation, what you folks do. Can you just give us a very quick summary and
Sure.
you know, who should reach out to you after this webinar?
Yeah. Thanks for that. I would like to talk to anyone who would like to increase their high school student recruitment program and talk to me. So the Imagine America Foundation partners with 30,000 high schools across the United States. We work with 150 career colleges across the United States. The majority of them are for-profit institutions, so we know this space really well. What we do is 3 things for those institutions. Number 1, we offer a scholarship and award program that we run on behalf of those institutions. So you can think of it as like an outsourced institutional scholarship program that comes with the second part and third part of what we do, which is community outreach and marketing to high schools, workforce boards, VA offices, as well as organic lead generation. So if you would like to talk to me about any of those things, please reach out.
Awesome. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll send a follow-up with Lee's contact information. I know it was on the slides. But
May I give an Imagine America plug?
yeah, please.
Yeah,
Lee,
please.
you're all right with that? All right. So a few things. One is if you have any challenges with your gap financing and you want to really soften that, Imagine America rocks. And it's not just high school students. You know, they can help you with your adult population as well. And then in that conversation, and when a high school student that maybe has a really low GPA gets approved for an Imagine America scholarship for $1,000, man, can you celebrate that? And boy, can you get referrals off of that pumped up person and his family. And it's really a home run. So any of you that want help with some of your gap financing, I would absolutely reach out to that. I wouldn't even limit it to just high school, although it's a killer way to get in.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for saying that, Tash. Yeah, and we do provide certificate and award letters for those students, and those are often presented at awards nights and gives some good publicity for the school that way too.
Okay. One question in the chat that I was going to ask as well is, what are some of the typical mistakes, or
That's a great question. I would say the number 1 mistake is not keeping up with it. It is something that, and to Tash's point, and he mentioned it a little bit earlier, he said, it depends on what time of the year you're talking about your starts, because high school students in their senior year, they may start that in August or September, and that goes all the way to May or June. And you're in communication with that student that entire time, or you're trying to establish relationships with these counselors. It's not done overnight. It's not done. Maybe it might take more than a year to establish some really solid relationships where you're able to go in and recruit students. But I'm telling you, if you're able to go into a high school and recruit 3-4 students every single year to 10 high schools around your campus locations, what does that mean for your school? Is that worth the investment? And that's what, at the end of a year, 2 years, 3 years, that's what you'd be looking at. And that's something that, you know, that can carry with you for a long time, the relationships with those counselors and teachers in high schools.
So I want to share this tip. Oh, I'm sorry. One quick tip. And if you're really having a challenge getting into a high school, give away a few fellowships, get some of their teachers, instructors, shop instructors, get them taking a course on your campus for free. Just give it to them. You know, give them the field trips, trip them to teach, treat their handful of students to, food and a super cool experience, and pay for all the expenses and, the bus ride and whatever insurance you need to put on that. You will get a positive ROI on it. And you want to create ambassadors on that high school for your career fields and your education.
Mm-hmm.
Great point. Yeah, we didn't even talk about professional development and what you could be doing to help teachers and counselors. A great point. Thanks for mentioning that.
So this, if I'm thinking from a marketing lens, this is a PR campaign, right? And this is a sustained one. This is a community relations campaign, which is a subset of PR.
Yeah.
So this is a strategy that needs to be committed to over multiple years. It needs to be resourced, like somebody has to be in charge of it and have metrics they're trying to meet that are realistic. Sure. This is a campaign. It's not a sales effort, right? It's
absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of to answer that person's question about how things fall apart, if you look at it from a traditional lead generation standpoint and you're comparing it to how adult students convert that come from PPC campaigns, then yeah, you're going to be upset about it. It's going to take a little bit of time. And yeah, to your point, it's a little bit of PR, business development that goes into this. And so it's just it's an interesting way of looking at using this.
Okay, can we talk about tools in the toolkit for a sec? Like, just tactics, some specifics, and maybe some takeaways somebody on this webinar could implement.
When you say tools, you mean?
I don't know, man. Something.
Okay.
What is something practical? What could I do tomorrow or this afternoon to get started?
Yeah, I think number one, you should look at the state counselor association meetings. I think you should look at the homeschool association meetings. I think you should look at what you currently have within your own building. As far as you have financial aid experts, setting up something or inviting high schools to attend a FAFSA night and helping students fill out their FAFSA is something that you could probably put together relatively quickly. And then to Tasha's point, inviting teachers to come and learn a little bit more about your campus and to come take a look at the school and the different tools that they're using. I think those are all great ways to establish relationships sooner as opposed to later that might help you get your foot in the door.
Okay. And so in virtual, I'm going to plug us for a sec, we'll take a minute. So in Virtual Advisor, our software tool, it's got a toolkit of different, lead generation tools. And one of them is a high school pathway that's designed to contextualize career education against traditional ed. And the idea is that an admissions person or somebody who's presenting in a high school or through a guidance counselor could give this tool to students as a way to explore whether it's kind of a fit with what they want, possibly use it with their parents as well. Do you have an opinion on whether that as a tool is effective or not?
So your question is about, remind me again, this is about comparing school
I'll show you. Why don't we do that?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, that might clarify for me. I'm more of a visual person.
Yeah. I was looking for a plug, Lee. I don't know if
I'm sorry.
I
recommend enrollment resources in virtual.
Yes, thank you. Yes. So what this tool in Virtual Advice, it would be something that would be sent, given away, filled out at a career fair or in a high school presentation for the prospect, and for the high school student exploring whether career ed is right. So we'll make Lee, you can be our prospect.
Fantastic.
And I don't know what your email is, so it's going to make one up. And starts to take them through an exploration of career education compared to traditional ed. So after high school, how much planning have you done? Oh, not very much. I'm super prepared, right? And so the student falls in this continuum somewhere. What kind of education are you pursuing or likely to pursue? If they're a bachelor's degree person, they're probably not, at least now, ready for career ed. But if they're a diploma, I'm interested in finding an apprenticeship, I'm going to take some time off, I don't know what I want to do. This is the kind of continuum of the high school students. Then that opens the door to career ed. Researching your career options. What research have you done? I'm just starting. Talk to family and friends, spoken with a admissions person or a counselor or whatever. Buying committee, right? Who are the supporters? Or no, sorry, the supporter, the parents supportive. And in our observation, this is the disconnect, right? If mom and dad view little Sally as she's going to go get a degree and be a lawyer, right? Or be a doctor. And sure. Sally goes, oh no, I want to be a hairdresser. There's a pretty broad disconnect, and mom and dad are generally not very supportive of that. But if they're aligned in their goals for the kid, then it's a much more likely enrollment. Is that a fair way to think about it?
Absolutely. And yeah, this tool, I could see what you're mentioning earlier. What are some tools that could be implemented to help counselors? And this would be a great resource counselors could use to help students better understand the options that are out there for them and to see their aptitude for something like this. And I would agree with your stance on parent and guardian support being very important. And I think that we as a sector need to do a good job of educating those individuals about these different opportunities.
This is an aside, but I think it's very interesting. A couple of weeks, hopefully, we're going to be releasing some research from Virtual Advisor. We've taken about 200,000 prospects that have filled out some version of this survey or other ones. And the question of who are the supporters, right? Who's the main supporter? There was one person that emerged as the dominant supporter across the board. And can you guess who it is?
Teacher, counselor.
No. Mom. It's amazing. It's obvious, right? When you think about it, of course it's mom. We'd never thought about it that way, but like universally, and if I go back, hopefully this will mess things up, this is an open-ended field. Like most of the things in quizzes, we find closed questions get a higher response rate. It keeps them moving. This is one of the few open-ended questions. And even as an open-ended question, mom emerged as kind of the person, right? Who's driving, who's the part of the buying committee. Super interesting. And then goals, hate, passion, career, I'm making a difference, whatever it is, right? We find many people don't have clearly articulated goals, so giving them something to pick from helps galvanize that as a motivator. And then in this survey, now we're trying to contextualize career education against like a more academic education. So the typical strengths of career ed are, focus on a specific career path. I want hands-on training compared to lectures. It's important to me the school helps me with job placement. I want training I complete in less than a year or two. Those typically are where the career schools win. And then they would, of course, pick their program, whatever. And if there's another one, they could tell us what it is. And it gives them a little score on their kind of alignment with career education as an option. So in your experience, if our clients or we're pushing someone like this as a tool to distribute through high school counselors, would they be amenable to it?
I think so, yeah. I think that any resources that could be provided to counselors to help them identify students that would be a great fit for career and technical education would be a good thing. And I'd be interested to see year-over-year data that you've been able to collect that supports some of the things that we talked about earlier in this presentation about students being more interested in a career-focused education that could tell a really compelling message.
Well, it's certainly anecdotally, there's 1 million fewer students that enrolled as freshmen in 4-year programs this year.
Yeah, right.
Right? Like those guys are getting murdered. That's a lot.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
okay, okay, great. Let me unshare this. Okay, so we have a few minutes left, and we'll see if there's any other questions. Before we wrap up though, Lee, is there anything that we didn't talk about that we should have?
I think we touched on a lot of the main components. I would say, start as easy as you can, and can to do to create these types of relationships, and try to use as much as the things that you already have in house that you're really good at, and to start there and then build upon that as you go. And it looks like, Ian, you had asked a question about the use of social media. It's funny you mentioned that. Obviously social media is very important to any sort of marketing campaign, and in the high school student, maybe more so in the Snapchat and TikTok field. And I didn't talk about that in this presentation, but it is something worth noting. Most of my presentation is talking about relationships with high school counselors, because I do think that is vitally important. But if you're going to start social media campaigns, I would recommend Snapchat and TikTok, just because that's the demographic that are using those campaigns, and less so Facebook. I probably don't need to tell any of you some of this information, but I would suggest less Facebook, more Snapchat, and getting into TikTok if you haven't already.
Interesting. That's an awesome idea. Okay, so let's just summarize and then we can wrap up if there's no more questions. So what I'm taking away from this is that you need to think about high school recruiting as a campaign, and you're really trying to build a community. We have a concept called the knowledge community, which is the idea that you're building a group of influencers, adding value to them in a meaningful way to create a referral network over time. And it's really a version of what schools should be doing at the program level with the employer groups. Same model, you're just applying it to high school guidance counselors and influencers in that area.
Yeah, I would say stick with it and use partners, because again, it's one thing for you to talk about your school. It's another thing for someone else to talk about your school, and giving that the third party validation that your school deserves. So I would suggest reaching to local organizations or national organizations that can help you do this, because it's tough, but it's something worth doing.
And the underpinning to it is really from a mission of service kind of perspective, right? We are not coming in asking for stuff.
Exactly.
We are bringing gifts of knowledge, swag. Somebody just put in the comments, gift bags, swag, t-shirts, and awesome idea, right? Just everyone likes free stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll be interested to see what typically goes in those gift bags. But one thing that I know just from my time in high school is that they would have these, and I can't think of the name of them, but they're the triangle shaped like flags with the school names on it. Would be a really cool idea, because they hang places. But yeah, logos on water bottles, great idea. Coffee mugs, other things of that nature, good idea.
Awesome. Okay, Lee. Fantastic content. Thank you so much. This was super helpful, and I think everyone on the webinar learned a lot. If they need to get in touch with the burning desire, can't wait to the email we're going to send out later. They got to get in touch with you right now. Where do they go? I'm typing it in the chat right now. Here you go. Lee will type it in the chat. There you go. It's Lee D at imagine-america.org. That's the one. I've got last question for you. Go ahead. Does your mother call you Lee or Leroy? Depends on whether or not I'm in trouble. Fun fact about me, I'm related to the inventor of baseball. I don't know if you knew that. Abner Doubleday invented baseball. I'm related to the inventor of baseball. So I'm as American as they come, baby. Abner Doubleday invented baseball. Cooperstown, New York, they got a whole field for it. And everything, yeah. So wow, I should be a bigger baseball fan, or at least I should be rich, but I'm not. Lee, thank you so much. Everyone who's attended, thank you so much. Like I said, we'll be sending out information on Lee and a link to this recording. Have a terrific day, and thank you for attending. Thank you all for joining me.